I definitely want to touch on delivery method because I think that's really important too, because there are a couple of different ways of delivering feedback that really differ, don't they? Can you tell us what those are, if you can
Yeah,
remember?
hugely different. So the thing you might encounter, particularly if you're kind of just stepping into the space and like sending your script off for some notes, like a transaction. Got a spec script, you send it off to a consultant who does one-off written notes, and you get back, well, effectively a script report to all intents and purposes. Um, those written notes, particularly if there is no opportunity to discuss them with the person who wrote them, I think is the most challenging to work with. It's so challenging. Like at Script Angel, we don't go anywhere near it. I just think it's too hard for writers, and it's really unsatisfying from our end as well to work in that way.
Which,
Pure
funnily
written
enough,
notes.
is just to say is probably the most readily available type
Yeah,
of
it
notes that
is.
are out there. That you get them from
Yeah.
services, you get them from competitions. It is one
Yeah.
way written feedback generally, isn't it? Which is
Oh,
tough.
really tough, really, really tough. And we'll talk about, when you're giving notes in that form, kind of ways you can kind of help mitigate some of that. But as a receiver of written notes with no opportunity to discuss them with the person who wrote them, I think it's the most challenging and a time at which you most need to separate yourself from the work, and to try and make sure you kind of hold the way it's written really lightly and just find the notes that you find most helpful, because it is most likely to be where you've paid, and so you can do the notes or not. If you are engaging professionally, so you've been optioned, you're in development, and you get written notes, there should be an opportunity, even if it's the written notes that come first, there should be an opportunity to discuss them.
Yeah.
And neither of those is my preferred way of working. But it is something you're going to encounter if you're receiving feedback. Certainly,
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
getting written notes, if there is an opportunity to pay a little bit more to be able to have a follow-up call to discuss, I would really consider it, because the problem with written notes is I'm trying to guess what I think you wanted this to be or
Uh-huh.
achieve. And I'm
Uh-huh.
trying to guess your intent. And so I'm giving notes based on my best guess as to
Yeah.
what you intended on the page, and then trying to kind of help you make sure that that's what it is. But I could have completely misconstrued that. That
Yeah.
has
So
happened
that
to me. The
does.
NJ did do written notes, and the covering kind of pitch document pitched it as one genre, and then the script was a very different genre. And so I assumed that the pitch document was what they wanted it to be. And so I gave a whole set of written notes about how the script needed to address things in order to deliver the genre they were pitching.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got a really upset email back saying, no, the pitch doc was out of date. It wasn't the genre they intended, and my notes were entirely useless. So it's
Which would have been sold within the first 5 minutes of a discussion.
exactly. So at that moment, we ditched written notes. I'd only dabbled in it in Script Angel's earliest days, and I was just absolutely, there is no way we can work like this, because it
Yeah.
isn't how, so it isn't how you work when you're in development as a
Yeah.
script tester anyway.
So there's written
So
notes. There's written
written
notes
notes,
with discussion.
yeah. And then my preferred, obviously, is verbal notes. Um, and that's the way we work at Script Angel with coaching. And sometimes you might be able to get verbal notes where you also ask the person giving notes to send a written summary of what you've discussed.
Yeah.
Um, but I would always take your own notes during a discussion. And obviously, the huge advantage of verbal notes um, is that I can ask you questions about what you intended.
Yeah. Sure.
And then on the hoof, figure out live as we're talking the why the script hasn't quite delivered the thing I've now understood you to have intended, and what we
Yeah.
do about that together.
Yeah. Totally.
Because for me, development is always, always, always about helping you get clear about your intent and then helping you make your intent clear on the page. That's it. That is all it is.
100%, 100%. I think as a writer, that's where I stand. I think, if it's between written feedback or written feedback followed by a discussion or just the discussion, and then also you could have a summary of those, of that discussion afterwards, right? That's in fact my favorite is a verbal discussion where questions are asked and we kind of really get into it. But then I love it when they send a written summary afterwards. It doesn't always happen, but if the person, if the people you're working with are really on it, it's lovely to get a summary because I look at my notes after a verbal call and they're not legible. I don't know what I've written. I've just written
Yeah,
like down the word darkness, and I don't know what that means. I can't remember
right.
what we were talking about. So yeah, summaries
Yeah,
are really
and
useful.
and the other thing, so we do it at Script Angel, and it's always worth asking the person giving you notes if they might be up for it. Which is, can we audio record it? So at Script
Yeah,
Angel, we audio record the session, and you get sent that audio file. And obviously, the advantage of all of these tools now is a lot of them will transcribe. So
yeah,
you could get a transcript of the conversation, and then nobody has
and
to write any notes.
and that's a great point actually because it's important to say if you are entering into development, it's not always your choice, but you do get a chance to at least say how you prefer your notes. Some people will even ask, they'll say, how do you best receive your notes? And so it's good to kind of say it. Obviously, it's like we said, it's not always your choice, depending on where you are in the process. If you're a bit
Yeah.
further down the line, you haven't really got any choice. You've just got to take it as it comes. But certainly in those early days of development, right, you can stipulate, you can ask.
Yeah, I think it's good to be able to handle notes in all of those different forms and
Yeah.
also to be aware of how you respond to them. And so if you are getting notes in a way that you find really challenging, be aware of that and try and mitigate that.
Yeah.
And the other thing to say is the person giving the notes might not have a choice about how they're giving them either.
Yeah.
I was on one show where it was read script, pick up phone, have conversation, send summary. And then there was an editorial decision made quite high up that they wanted to see all written notes in advance. So I was now having to write my notes for other
Uh,
people to see because there were anxieties about whether the notes that were being given to the script editors were actually going in their pure form to the writers.
yeah.
So they
Yeah.
wanted to see the evidence that you'd given the notes you were meant to have been
Oh,
given. So
talk
you
about
had to write them.
micromanagement. Wow.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. So, but just to say, the person in some of those contexts, it isn't always the note giver's choice either.
It does get trickier the further down the line you get, definitely. But then that's why we need these tools, right? To be able to navigate it. That's the whole
Yeah.
point. And if you start by applying these things really early, it just makes you better at navigating by the time you get down the line. So one thing I really want to cover is some tips for people on how to respond, like what to do. And there's some really important ones in here. You've sent me a really lovely list, and there's a few in here that I hold really dear and have been really crucial in my career. So, what tips? What can you think of off the top of your head of tips that you can
Yeah.
offer these guys for how they can respond when they get these notes?
I think the first thing to do is to acknowledge that you're going to respond emotionally, no matter how hard you try not to, and to give yourself the time and space to do that. Whether that is written notes and you do not send anything in response for 24 hours apart from thank you for the notes, or if it's in a conversation and the person says something
Yes.
and you're like, just take a breath. And it's okay and it's natural and it's normal. But even if you're super professional, you will have poured a lot of yourself into this work. And so the idea that we can just compartmentalize and go, well, it's just the work, it's not me. That's not really true, let's be honest. Because you are in the work
Absolutely.
and you
Yeah.
just need to give yourself permission and not be too hard on yourself that you are responding emotionally, but create
Yeah.
that time and space.
And it's okay to say that you'll think about it, to take that time. I think that for me is the most crucial thing because I've, when you're in those positions and you're getting those notes, it sometimes can be really easy to wear your reaction on your face
Yeah.
and just be, and then that's what makes things difficult. And it's not saying that you have to lie to people if you disagree with their note. You just have to take it. It's about conditioning yourself to genuinely go, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
In your head, you might be going, no, absolutely not. But as long as you're going, okay, but it is interesting though that you're giving me that, and I'm going to take it. All you're going to get is that it's interesting, and
Yes.
I will absolutely digest that. But I'm going to need to, because it's not just about taking one note at face value. Normally, one note affects everything, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Sometimes it could be a whole house of cards that are going to come crashing down based on that one note. So totally, I think for me, when I learned that about just taking those notes and going, okay, yeah, interesting. And that's a thinker. Let me think about that one. And
Yeah.
sometimes it actually turns out, okay, that might actually be a good idea. I just needed some time to get past that emotional response,
Yeah.
like you're talking about.
And I think as the receiver of a note that you are reacting strongly to in a negative way, to start to kind of pick apart why you're reacting negatively, whether
Yeah,
it's because you're not clear about the intent behind the note, whether it's because the note moves the work into a direction you don't want it to go, or whether it's just the amount of work it creates that is breaking your heart. No, I can't do that because House of Cards, complete rewrite, whatever.
yeah,
So I
yeah, yeah,
think
yeah.
starting to self analyze your reaction and break down why you're reacting so strongly to it internally. Having said it's
Absolutely.
interesting, I'm screaming inside.
Definitely. And as a side note, I would apply this to the sort of wider thing of like emails as well. So if you get rejections and stuff, or on any piece of work or anything like that, I apply that rule to everything. Don't respond immediately, because immediately will be your emotional response. I will always give it at least the rest of the day, or if it's late in the day, early the next day,
Yeah.
to give me time for that emotion to subside and the sort of logical side of my brain to kick in, because you'll save yourself, just saying something that you shouldn't, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Ugh,
I think just giving yourself, yeah, that time and space and understanding it's not something you're going to suddenly, the more you do this, that reaction doesn't disappear. You just get better at building in the time to process it. And that's okay. And the other thing I just wanted to add is that it's okay to ask them to clarify what they mean.
yeah, yeah,
I think that's really important. Don't be afraid, even if you're a newer writer working with a very experienced scripted development professional, that doesn't mean they're always getting it right or that their note is a great note. We would hope it is, but sometimes we haven't made ourselves clear, or we've given a note where the intent isn't clear. We'll come on to that a bit in a minute.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think making sure you feel confident enough to ask for that clarification is really important.
Definitely. And that for me, that's attached to digging into the why of the note. So normally if it's something that they're giving a note that makes you go, oh God, well, yeah, that's big. Asking them, okay, so why do you think that? Getting into a bit deeper, what is it that's not landing? And is it attached to something that is a deal breaker for me? Is something that's really important, but clearly I'm not getting it across enough. So if I can articulate what I'm trying to do, and you agree that that's good, we agree that's the direction we want to go, then we can move down that way. So yeah, it's like getting behind the why of it, isn't it? It's like people always say, getting behind what the note behind the note and what they're actually trying to say behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also going back to that question about specs and also feedback from peers, being able to develop that ability to identify whether the note is making it a better version of the thing you want it to be, or whether it's just making it different,
Yeah.
and then figuring out whether that's a change you want to make, but being aware that they have bumped up against something, right?
Yeah,
Whether you like the
sure.
note or you don't like the note, something is sitting underneath that. So even if you're writing on spec and you don't have to address it, you can just ignore it. You could
Yeah.
just park it, whatever, just say it was subjective
Yeah,
and take no notice.
definitely.
They bumped up against something, so it's worth exploring and digging into.
It is absolutely. Even if it's yeah, just so say they give you a note that is it is just a different version. It's like it's the same thing. You're just offering me a different version. So perhaps they're saying that what you've done, it's not that it's not any good. It's just that perhaps it wasn't surprising. So that, they might have seen it
Yeah,
before or they saw it coming or something like that. And perhaps there's a way in which you can take that to the next level, or maybe you did just go with the first choice that you made and you haven't interrogated why you've done a certain thing, yeah, again, just looking slightly beyond what they mean beyond that initial note that's kind of come at you. One thing that always sticks in my mind, I think it's Helen Black sends her own notes along with drafts. So she'll sort of anticipate and say, look, this is my thoughts of like where it's at, what I'm thinking, and so I'm kind of getting ahead so that you know that also have thoughts. I'm not handing you something that I think is perfect. I also have notes, so that it's immediately in her mind a discussion, and it's kind of a level playing field thing, isn't it? And ensuring that you're not positioning yourself as a writer below the note giver and being like, am I impressing you yet? Is it working for you yet? What can I do to make you happy? It's making sure that it's on par.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that you get better at as you do this more and receive more notes and hopefully start to work in to have your work optioned and be in development is to identify different kinds of notes
Yeah.
that you're getting,
Yeah.
none of which are perfect, and they all come with their own issues, and kind of just being aware of that and knowing how to get a better note out of the giver.
And sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes somebody's just not good at it, and they can be pretty high
Yes.
up in their job as well. They can get pretty far and still not be very good at delivering something. But again, that's down to then your skill of deciphering it, and so yeah, let's